Hey everyone, Mark and Steve here.
Before we get started today, we want to let you know about Dare to Connect, our new online interactive video platform.
For less than the cost of a therapy session, you and your spouse get live access to both of us 3 times a week.
Each 30-minute live group support session provides interactive mentoring and healing for addicts, spouses, and couples.
If you're loving our podcast and our unique style of bringing you recovery, you're going to love Dare to Connect.
To learn more, go to daretoconnectnow.com. We're looking forward to seeing and working with you. Hey everybody, I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSE Squared podcast. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the PBSE podcast. Steve Moore here, along with Mark Castleman. It's good to be with you guys today. It is July 18th, 2022, and we've got a good topic to address today. One that actually really kind of, what did you say, Mark? Got us in the feelers a little bit.
It kind of breaks your heart. It does.
It does.
It
Absolutely.
breaks your heart as you read it, and it's like, wow. Fortunately. Yeah. Well, I was going to say we haven't faced things like this. Things maybe in the same general category.
Yeah, definitely the same vein, and can relate, and so it's going to be a good podcast today. We got a submission from a subscriber about last week sometime, and this is what she said: would this have happened if my spouse had married someone else? This meaning the story that follows. 3 years ago, my marriage and my life, as I knew it, imploded upon learning that my husband of 21 years had been living a double life of lies, infidelity, and addiction for our entire relationship. I began intense therapy for betrayal trauma in 2019, and in the 2 years that followed, we struggled with couples recovery, and my husband struggled with his own recovery, which included alcohol addiction in addition to his sexual acting out with both women and men. One of the things that my therapist tried to help me see early on is that my husband would have walked his path no matter who he married. That it didn't matter what kind of partner I was or how good or bad our marriage was that he would have acted in the same manner regardless of who he was with. Sadly, my husband lost his battle with alcohol last year. We are so sorry for the loss.
Yeah.
What a tragedy. Now I am left with a million questions about how we ended up where we did. Did he ever truly love me? What did I do to contribute to the breakdown of our marriage and his death? Is there really nothing I could have done or said to help him or prevent his going outside our marriage for sexual gratification? And so many more. I struggle to accept what my therapist tells me, that my husband's behavior was a reflection not on me or our marriage, but solely on him. I have been listening to your podcast since my husband passed, and in addition to a tremendous amount of education, it has helped me see the real recovery could have looked like for my husband had he been able to get there. It helps me to know that what I thought recovery could be, although not easy, was not unrealistic. I would love your perspectives as clinicians and as recovering addicts on the question that I can't seem to get some closure on, and that is, would this have happened no matter who he married or what kind of marriage he had? Thank you for reading and for the wonderful content you bring to this community. What a great message. Heavy, and we appreciate the compliments and appreciate you, listener, for being a listener. We're glad that you're finding help with it, and we're hoping that we can, Mark and I were talking about getting ready for this today. We're hoping that we can definitely answer this in some ways as clinicians, but this listener already has a therapist in their life, so hopefully we can answer this in a way that helps you as a couple of guys who've been in similar roads as your husband and are kind of in a different, better place now, and hopefully that'll be of help to you and to everybody else tuning in, because even though your story is unique, a lot of the sentiments I think that you vocalize are are really common with a lot of people that tune into us.
Yeah. And I hope the tragic nature of this, I hope that all of those listening today will take this, if it can be, as kind of a wake-up call.
Yes.
Because as difficult as things may seem today, as difficult as they are, it could be worse, right? You could lose your loved one and they're gone. And so whatever you're going through today as a couple, keep trying, keep working, keep fighting for each other, because you don't know when your ability to do that is going to end.
Yeah. What Mark, what you're saying is so true. I mean, I think back on our addiction days, and how many times did both of us, or how many times do so many out there that struggle, and spouses as well, say, well, we'll work on it tomorrow, or we'll fix it tomorrow, or I'll make that change. I'll call that therapist. I'll get into a 12-step program. I'll do, fill in the blank tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you never know if there's going to be a tomorrow, really.
You don't know. So. Yeah. Well, so, the big question that she asks, which really, hit us as we read it, would this have all happened if my spouse had been married to someone else?
Yeah.
That's a really poignant, hard-hitting question. And you can absolutely understand how someone would start asking all of these what ifs. What if I had done this? What if I had been better at that? What if I had showed up in this way? And it's very natural for us to go to that place. I can speak to that from my own personal experience. Now that I've been in recovery for a long time and my mind is more clear than it's ever been in my life, I have the ability, obviously not perfectly, but to a large degree, I can step back today and I can look at myself, that guy that I was over those decades and decades of addiction, and I can ask this question. I can ask this question in some ways for my spouse. If she had been different, how different would my journey have been? Yeah. And I have to, and I'm not saying this to put this on everyone, because there are relationships that are extremely difficult. There are relationships, with couples I've worked with where it was extremely toxic from both sides, from both spouses. For me personally, and for many of the couples I worked with, I would have to say that it may have mattered a little what my wife could have done different, but I would have to say for the majority of my addiction acting out and the choices that I made, I don't think she would have made a significant difference by doing things differently than she did. Yeah. Like I say, some tweaks, some things could have been done different, but would that have completely changed my trajectory? And I would say absolutely not. That's me personally. Yeah.
No, I'm sitting here and I'm just reflecting on the same thing. And we talked about this quite a bit before we recorded today. What a scary, like Mark indicated, healthy wake up call to anybody else who's listening to this, because it's the time to change is now. But I look back and when for me, 8 years into sobriety, about 10 years ish into this process of recovery, the first couple of years were kind of various levels of floundering, and trying to get serious about it and struggling to find traction. I would say that, like, for example, when it came to sobriety for me, the first year, most people, or a lot of the people that I work with, oftentimes say the first year is the hardest. For me, it was actually years like 2 and 3, because that's when I started to get more clear-headed about just all the stuff that I'd done, like my impact on the relationship. My perspective started to expand beyond just my own world and the impact addiction had like on me. And I started to connect in new ways with the amount of impact it had on my partner. And I was looking back, on all of the things we'd been through and how many things I'd put her through. And it seemed like on year 3, especially, I remember every time we would do something fun, there was a bittersweetness to it, because I'd have fun doing something and then immediately think, what many addicts have thought. Wow, that was a great vacation. Why couldn't our last 10 vacations have been that way?
Mm-hmm.
Why couldn't I have shown up that way before? And as I looked back on that, like you, Mark, my wife, we both learned a lot in this process, and there were definitely some major changes that Brittany had to make in this process in key ways that she grew. But I would also agree. I mean, if I get really honest with myself, if anything, if I'd been married to somebody different, depending on how they would have, the only way that I could have seen that influencing recovery or I guess getting out of addiction, for me, in most ways, it probably would have happened later. If anything, the impact, if anything, married to someone different probably would have just been a negative one, you could say, because my story followed a trajectory where, my wife loved me enough to, even when we didn't know anything about recovery, just to say, look, we can't keep doing this and we need to do something else because we can't do both these roads anymore of a marriage. And you do.
And it's interesting that you say that, because I'm just the opposite. And this is probably a really great insight for this gal who wrote into us.
Absolutely.
See, for me, my wife actually wasn't firm enough. She didn't speak her truth, stand her ground, hold me to consequences, hold me accountable. Yeah. And so I stayed in stealth secret mode, and my addiction dragged on for decades. Now, if she had been more proactive, had more knowledge, she had her own traumas from her past that made it very difficult for her to confront me. And I hated confrontation. I would avoid it at all costs. And she knew it.
Yeah.
Well, mine drug on forever. If she had been different and confronted me earlier, would the outcome have been different? Two things could have happened. I probably would have ended up divorcing if she had confronted me that hard.
Yeah.
So probably would have ended the relationship completely. And then, of course, I would have went totally off the deep end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I would have started into recovery maybe a little bit earlier if she had been tougher.
Yeah.
That's possible. But could I have somehow avoided the various doorways I had to walk through and the lessons I needed to learn and all the stuff that it took for me to heal and get healthy? No, I still had to travel that road.
Yes.
There's no way around that road based on the actions of someone else. This is a really important concept for everyone to hear clearly. Others can have an influence. Others can certainly, have their place, but I still need to face my stuff.
Yep. No, I would agree with that sentiment as well. I mean, because as I look back, the journey to getting to that point where we kind of hit that crossroads where things started to change, I wish I could tell you that it was an immediate deviation. It was some sort of a, I don't know, life-changing one-time experience. It wasn't, right? It was no. It was gradual and grudging. I mean, the first time I went to a 12-step group was just to really get my wife off my back. I mean, that sounds terrible, but that's the truth. I wasn't in a place yet where I was convinced I could change, but it was a catalyst enough to at least try to do something different. But I was still, I still was and still probably am, a stubborn not enough of a person to where the consequences had to mount up to such a degree to where, the shift, at least for me, was, well, screw it. I may as well try something different because it's not like it can get any worse.
Well, and what I'm really hearing in the story that was sent to us, in some ways, what I hear in her husband, and I know that this is kind of the tragedy of it.
Yeah.
He kind of ran out of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
There were lots and lots and lots of places along my addiction and recovery path where I could have easily died. Easily. And I don't know all the reasons, all the cosmic reasons why my time frame was extended so that I could keep working through stuff until I got it, which took decades, by the way. But this guy, just for whatever reason, he kind of ran out of time.
Yeah.
And
yeah. No, absolutely. Well, and you know what you said earlier is kind of hitting home to me, because I'm just putting myself in the spot of this listener, and in this term of answering her question. I mean, my problems, and I would say maybe this is connecting with a little bit of the clinical side for a minute, shifting gears. I would say, if I look back on my career, I could easily count on one hand and maybe a couple of fingers, where as a professional, I would have honestly looked at the relationship and said, you probably would have been fine if you guys hadn't been together. Like, out of the hundreds or thousands of clients, high hundreds, I don't know how many people I've worked with over the years, but one or two, honestly, I could have ever even maybe supposed that was the case. Because the reality is that what brought and what brings people to my office, and I'm sure this is similar for Mark, was a culmination of issues that did occur to some degree in the marriage. But for the vast majority of the guys that I work with, these issues had root and place in relationships and in circumstances and environments that predated the spouse or the marriage or that relationship in almost every way.
Yeah. And this is something really important for this gal to keep in mind, that your husband, even though the two of you were together for 21 years, he brought, when you moved in together, not only did he move in his furniture and, pulled his car into the driveway and all the things that you saw, he backed up a whole moving truck of all the baggage and stuff you couldn't see, and moved all that into the house and into your marriage as well. And there was absolutely nothing that you could have done to prevented that. You didn't cause it. You couldn't fix it. That was what he brought with him. And frankly, being in the marriage, he did finally get to the place where he started to work on it.
Yes.
I mean, it took 19 years for him to get started, according to what she wrote us. But I would say, kudos to you, to this gal. Good for, you hung in with him, which is miraculous from everything you've described. Wow. You should get like the world's the shiniest gold medal for hanging in there. And he did get to the place where he started working on it. So like we said, for whatever reason, he just kind of ran out of time, almost too little too late. But so much admiration and absolute respect and just wonder at this woman for hanging in all that time.
No, for sure. Well, and this question is not vocalized in this listener's message, but I'd be pretty confident saying she's thought it more than once, and I know many other listeners have thought it as well. There's always that question when it comes to betrayal, especially when it happens on this level of, I was married to this person for X amount of years. Why didn't I see this? Why didn't I catch it? I almost kind of hear that in the question, especially referencing a lot of spouses I've worked with in the past, right? There's that, well, maybe that's part of what she's meaning, right? If I'd been different, meaning maybe I was more aware, if I was more in tune, and I'd caught it faster, and, whatever the case may be. And the reality to that is that you can know someone extremely well, but, for us addicts, the level of compartmentalization that we're able to maintain, the way that we're able to maintain an outer exterior. We've used the term before. Many of us addicts, I wouldn't say all, but many of us, I would throw myself in this category, we're when it comes to emotionally masking, we're kind of master manipulators.
Oh, no question. I often said I kept my addiction secret from my wife for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And if I don't want to repeat on this podcast the great lengths I went to keep stuff hidden, because I don't want to give guys any ideas.
But it was extraordinary.
Extraordinary lengths to cover my tracks. I mean, my wife would have had to have been, a female Sherlock Holmes to have figured it out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's so true. And it's, I know that for a spouse, can be hard to hear, hard to believe, but I mean, that really is the truth. As I've indicated on the podcast before, it was probably the only thing I did right in this process is I was always open with my wife about what was going on. But as far as concealing it from other people, everyone from in-laws to family to all those people, I did that for decades and decades, just hiding that away. And
it's so perplexing for spouses and those around us because they have such a hard time reading us. We're so confusing. We're up, we're down. Our moods, right, are like the roller coaster ride, at the amusement park. They never know who's going to show up or where we're going to be. Mm-hmm. They walk around on eggshells and tiptoe because they don't know which guy is going to show up, in the next hour. It's so difficult for the people around us addicts because we confuse ourselves.
I was just going to say
we don't know who's going to show up in the next hour. How could this poor gal have done something different and known? I didn't know.
Well, and one gets so good at the lying and the compartmentalizing and telling different levels of truth and sharing different parts of oneself with other people that even the person doing it, we commonly lose track of that, right? Even we're the ones doing the deceiving, and we still right lose our ability to really track what is real and what is not.
And then we have so much shame that's in the equation and so many ways that we beat ourselves up. So in order to protect and shield us from that inner shame, we get into gaslighting to try to turn the attention away from us because it hurts so much to face our own stuff. So now we start turning that on everybody else around us so that they feel like they're the ones that are screwing up. I mean, it's one big entangled mess.
It really is. And again, I'm just sitting here and just kind of picturing the spouse and trying to visualize her situation and what she's doing. I mean, if I, one of those questions that also spouses have asked or that I've heard in sessions are things like, if not just if I'd been aware enough, but maybe if I'd been kinder, maybe if I'd been more open-minded, right? If I'd been more somehow quote unquote welcoming, right, to difficult information or whatever, maybe he would have shared. But and if there is any thought process in that to her or to anyone else listening, I think giving a voice to that too is important. Here's my thoughts on it. Looking back on myself and again with the guys that I work with, the reason why we keep those things from other people has, even though there may have been traumatic experiences early on in life that said, hey, sharing with people isn't safe. And that is definitely true. Those fears are wherever they stem from originally are internal mechanisms, right? I mean, obviously, would some of that other stuff potentially play a role? Possibly, but I would say whatever role it was, at least for myself and for many of the men I work with, it would be a minimal one. There was in my own mind, I know as an addict, the thought of Mark and I had many discussions about this before we published our first book, The Pornography Paradox. There was truly both of us agree that we literally would have rather died before people knew about this.
No question.
Easily. It just,
my whole thing for decades was I'm taking this to the grave, period.
Yeah. And for me, it wasn't much different. It was like, okay, my wife and like one other person. But if like this ever like came out globally, or like clients knew about, like what would happen? Like, oh my God, my life would be over. Right?
Well, and you asked the question. So what a spouse says, what if I had been kinder to him? What if I'd been more open-minded? What if I had provided an environment that was more conducive to him coming forward? Well, I'm here to tell you that you just described my wife to a T.
Yes.
There was no one more kind, more compassionate, more patient, more open, more inviting than my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I never came forward.
Yes. Great example.
So there you go.
Okay. And it just goes to show and goes to speak to what we were just saying, right? Is that there's that, I mean, and both of us, as we've owned it with families and other people in our lives. And now obviously we kind of live completely on the other extreme, which may not be healthy for people. We talk about our experience every day, but that feeling, that perception. I remember when I first started opening up to close people, I mean, I was shocked at how accepting they were, with the exception of a very few, how much more accepting they were than I thought it would be.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Because you build it up in your mind. That fear has been building for every addict out there since their addiction started. For me, that had roots in my 13-year-old brain, and so that was just a presupposition. And like Mark, you indicated, I could have been talking to, I don't know, Gandhi and would have denied it up and down. Just like, it doesn't matter, I've just
very true. Yeah, very true.
So
yeah. So as we wrap up, our hearts go out to this dear woman who's wrote to us. I just want to say, from my heart to this gal, you did what you could. You
Yes.
did what you did what you were capable of. The fact that you stayed with your husband for all those years and just hung in there, to me, shouts volumes about the kind of person that you are. And I encourage you to just get the support. I hope you have a good, wonderful support system in place. I hope you've got other women to bounce this off of. Spend time with people who affirm you and build you up and help you to see what a wonderful, amazing human being you are. And just surround yourself. Let all of that embrace you, because you've been terrible, terrible, terrible things.
And one good place to maybe look at that, and I know obviously your husband is gone, which again, we are so sorry for, but one thing that I definitely would encourage you to do is if you haven't already, to be accessing a good quality 12-step support group as a family member of someone struggling with either sexual addiction or alcohol addiction. Because even though he is gone, working through those issues is still just as much of a necessity and should be just as much of a priority. And the tools that are contained in there are a really good complement to good therapy, learning how to surrender and move forward in a healthy way that way, and allowing him to own his stuff, even though he's not around versus not, are all really good components of that process as well. So that would be a good starting point.
I agree. Well,
we love talking about this stuff. As always, these podcasts, even when we go overtime on them, they're just never long enough, which is, for those of you who feel like you want to take this to the next level, there is an app for that. Well, there's a coming app for that. There's not
an app is coming. Yes.
An app is coming, but there is a program for that. Our Dare to Connect program meets every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We do supposedly 30-minute groups, each of those groups, but they usually run about 40 minutes for each of those groups. We give lots of bonuses there where we are able to interact with you, answer questions, interact with you live in chat. We've got a 2.0 version of our program that's coming out soon that's adding a whole slew of new features. We'll be rolling that on the next couple of months. We'd love to have you come join us. You can take a look at that at daretoconnectnow.com. And there is a 2-week free trial that you can access for that if you've never accessed the program before. Come give it a shot. We'd love to have you check it out with us and work in the trenches with us. So,
all right. We'll see. We'll look forward to spending time with all of you on our next PBSE podcast.
Sounds awesome. Have a great week, everybody.
Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.